In 1966, two German photographers set out in a Volkswagen for 6 months to photograph the monolithic architecture of gold mines in England and South Wales. In tow was their toddler, Max, their large format camera, and a darkroom housed in a caravan. The couple had married 5 years earlier, beginning a 4-decade-long partnership from which an entire school of photography would develop, hallmarked by its deadpan, studious view of the world and often rigorous sets of rules. Hilla and Bernd Becher were born in the 1930s, and having grown up in a Germany profoundly affected by World War II, made them experience in a short period of time great changes, in particular to the country's architecture and design. And architecture had always a great appeal to both of them, since Bernd grew up in Siegen, which is located in the Siegen-Wittgenstein district, once an iron ore mining region. Hilla, on the other hand, was mentored by photographer Walter Eichkrum, and her first photographic subjects were mainly local buildings. So together the couple started by traveling across Germany, photographing with a large 8x10 view camera. And their subjects were mostly industrial buildings such as barns, coal mines, oil refineries, gas tanks, storage silos, warehouses, you get the idea. They were fascinated by the similar shapes and great attention to detail and design in these buildings, and that led them to be very precise in the manner which they shot. At first, they would create an overall view of the landscape which included the main subject, setting it in its context, and showing the different aspects of the landscape relating and interacting with it. After that, the compositions that followed would usually assume different viewpoints, but never retracting the main focus from the subject they were photographing. According to what I read, the couple would only photograph on overcast days, early in the morning during the seasons of spring and fall, so as to avoid shadows and other light changes that would greatly affect how the building could be perceived. And in what we can consider to be driven from Bernd's knowledge from studying typography as a young man, the couple translated this formalistic language they developed in 9, 12 or 15 images, which they called typologies. Although their compositions might fall into the realm of formalism and neutrality, the feelings that led to them were far from being natural. In fact, while witnessing the change in Germany's landscape, Bernd said at some point, "I was overcome with horror when I noticed that the world in which I was besotted was disappearing." And to me, this is extremely important what they do, which is to capture almost what is a fleeting subject. And although a lot of critics of their work didn't appreciate what they call the repetitive structures and the repetitive sort of style of photography, I do acknowledge it as being incredibly beautiful and extremely important, because a lot of these buildings, at least in the world I stand now, do not exist anymore. And I can see photos of nearby towns where I live, and they looked completely different, only 20, 30 years ago. So it's really important what they do, and I consider that what they photograph is not so much, or the way they treat it, is not so much as industrial structures, but almost like unknown sculptures. And also this brings forward the idea of the preservation of memory. And I talked about this when I talked about in the David Lynch video about his photography. And basically what they do is to preserve an heritage. And I feel that photography is not only one of the fastest, but also one of the best medias to preserve something, to respect memory, to connect with something of the past or something that we lived For instance, just the simple fact of going through our archive reminds us of where we've been, who we were with, what we lived, how we felt back in the day, or back in somewhere where something really important happened to us. And so a more direct example of this would be that possibly you might relate to this, but I feel that there's some people in my family that I only know because their photos exist, solely because of that. Some of them I never got to meet. And so by having their photos and looking at their photos is a way of acknowledging their existence, or that they ever existed. It's a way of preserving the presence of someone. And I feel that it's very important. And also, if we think in the worldwide events that has happened, photography does take a great role in preservation and in the preservation of a memory. And in this case, Hilla and Bernd Becher, their photography is in a way an ode to memory. And so, posing the question of what we can learn from all this formalism, I think the answer is quite simple. Formalist photography, quote unquote, in very basic language, conceives the formal elements of a photo more important than subject matter. So through Hilla and Bernd's work, we can learn about composition, proportions, lines, perspectives, tones, which are vital to every photographer despite of the style he or she practices. Because at the end of the day, learning about every single formal element will help us translate or find new ways of communicating our ideas, themes, or feelings through our photography. And from 1976 to more or less around 1996, Bernd taught at the Arts Academy of Düsseldorf, and that created a significant impact in the German photographic world at the time, because they would influence a lot of young artists and photographers to have different approaches and views over photography's position, artistic goals, and aesthetics. And some of these young minds went on to have their own brilliant careers, such as the career of Andreas Gursky, Thomas Ruff, or Candida Oefer. However, they also influenced people from all points of the globe, in particular Ed Ruscha with his work 34 Parking Lots in Los Angeles in 1967, and Stephen Shore's Uncommon Places, published in 1982. And to put everything into perspective, when I was working on this video, I did realize at some point that obviously their work is very formalist, is very, about lines, about composition, so it's very disciplined. And I would put it that this happens in a world of where the current state of the art was more or less given to surrealist art and etc. And so this indirectly is a lesson, which is to stay true to our colors and to our ideas, and to be perseverant with our work. And it's not about paying off, but about being content and fulfilled with what we do. Doesn't matter what the current state of the art is right now, for instance. And so yeah, I guess that this has been a great video. I really enjoyed working on it because it really opened my eyes to different perspectives. And I really did learn a lot, so I hope that you learned a lot as well. And that, you had fun just going through, geeking around photography. And yeah, I guess that without further ado, I'll say my goodbyes here. So stay safe, keep shooting film, stay tuned for other videos, and peace.